Well, it's time now to take a look back at this week's headline-making stories in our Reporter's Rewind. Our guests at the round table are New York University journalism professor Pamela Newkirk. Arise News contributor Eric Ham is joining us from Washington, D.C. And we have back here in the studio freelance blogger and attorney Nyasha Laing. Hey, everybody.
How you doing?
Happy Friday to all of you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Okay, let's get started. We've got two big, meaty subjects to talk about. Let's start off with talking about the resignation of Attorney General Eric Holder. I mean, this raises a lot of questions about who will replace him, what will be his legacy, because he's a highly controversial and polarizing figure, and will the efforts of the DOJ under his leadership be continued with the next leader? So that's all big stuff. I see you nodding your head furiously, Pam.
Well, it's big stuff in so many ways. I mean, in the Obama administration, he was the most outspoken African-American, put a lot of starch in the backs of African-Americans across the country, and I think it's a big loss just for that alone. And of course, he did launch a number of civil rights investigations at police departments, including in Ferguson, and we want to make sure those continue to move forward.
Indeed. What are your thoughts? Eric, you're right there in the Beltway there in Washington. I think Republicans are, you know, rubbing their hands and salivating over this opportunity.
Absolutely. I mean, just as she just said, as shocked and as saddened as some people are to see him leave, I think there's a cadre of Republicans, particularly in the House, who have been so fed up with him over issues like Fast and the Furious. I think they're like, it's good to see you go, and so I think that's the way they feel about it. And if you just look at some of the responses from so many of these Republicans, they just see him as someone who's had an agenda, and which is pretty mind-boggling, because this is someone who I think has brought a lot of luster, particularly back to the Civil Rights Division, which was, I think, decimated under the Bush administration. And I think it just goes to show, the undercurrent and the level of partisanship here in Washington between Republicans and Democrats, but also I think just the deep racial divide, because he has done a lot, I think, for civil rights and for combating, I think, voting rights issues across the country. And I think that's a huge legacy to leave at the DOJ.
Yeah, in fact, Eric, Twitter lit up from Washington congressmen who expressed their glee, Republican congressmen who expressed their glee that he was leading, many of them criticizing him for ignoring the quote-unquote rule of law. You know, Nyasha, many people are worried about the Obama legacy with Eric Holder gone, because in many ways, Eric Holder was able to say things as a black man that the president either could not or would not.
I was remembering his words even as early as 2009, saying that we're a nation of cowards. And I actually was surprised at how much he got away with. But at the same time, he really struck me as a man, as a lawyer's lawyer. He really did believe in justice and fairness principles, and he made significant reforms to actually put things in place that should have been put in place from the time of the enactment of the Civil Rights Act.
And I think that's the problem, right?
And that's the problem that people have, but that was his focus. And now people are, if you take politics out of it, you will see that legacy. If you put it in, there are legitimate criticisms, for example, his handling of the, whether he was to jail the banks responsible for the default. So, there are a lot of, it will never be perfect, but I think he accomplished what he wanted to.
You know, what's interesting to me, and I suppose frustrating if I'm just really being honest about it, is in some of these tweets that I was referring to, Pam, many of these Republican lawmakers was calling him the worst attorney general in the history of the country, which to me is just a second verse to the same song they've been singing about Obama saying he was the worst president. And it's a little wearying, isn't it?
It really is. But, on the other hand, if whoever replaces him continues with the investigations into those police departments, if that person is not African American, they may actually be able to gain more respect from white America, because unfortunately it was seen as a black man going after white America, when he was pursuing justice.
Indeed.
A black man going after the Republican agenda, I think, is also another way of actually looking at it. Absolutely, sure.
Yeah, indeed. And he was accused of politicizing the position. That was one of the criticisms against him. I want to turn the page, talk about this other topic, because it's very meaty. And Eric, you chime in at your own caution and peril.
Okay.
We're going to talk about this New York Times column written by Alexandra Stanley, who she says she was trying to compliment Shonda Rhimes on Shonda's basically takeover of Thursday nighttime television with Grey's Anatomy scandal and this new one, How to Get Away with Murder. And she did that by saying she popularized the angry black woman.
I mean, she was essentially trying to get away with murder. I mean, she used one of the most bigoted, long-standing critiques, stereotypes of black women, and she ascribed that to Shonda Rhimes. It was not in any way meant as a compliment. I mean, if anyone read the article, there's no way you could say, oh, she was being complimentary.
You know, I tend to disagree, but I come out in the same place. You know, racism is not necessarily a set of bigoted beliefs. It's a set of values and an ignorance of the impact of the stereotype. And that's exactly what she did. She used this controversial statement, damaging and hurtful, to start her article and try and roll back then and say that she was really supporting celebrating these characters, these diverse characters on stage.
And then she went further to say that Viola Davis was not classically beautiful. Once again, you know, a statement that's rooted in a sense of, you know, the white hierarchical standard of beauty.
There was nothing affirming about it. You know, if Viola Davis herself said, I'm not classically beautiful, she can take that and she can affirm that, look, the woman is sexy, talented, and brilliant on camera. And she didn't do any of that.
Eric, I'm going to give you a safe way to get into this conversation. And that is, you know, part of what I wonder about this is how did this article get past so many editors and leadership to actually be published in the New York Times?
Precisely.
You know, and I'm new to this, you know, coming from Capitol Hill and think tank world academia, but I think it just goes to show the lack of diversity in the media, that there simply isn't a filter for things like this to get caught. And I think that's what's so disheartening is that, you know, we're talking about the paper of record, the New York Times, and you've got this critic who wrote something that was so inflammatory, so off the rails, and to think that someone, you know, not just the critic who wrote it, but there are editors who had to have looked at this and no one thought to think, wow, we can't put something like this out.
And it was in the lead. It was in the opening sentence of the story.
It was just,
and that's a whole other set of people, is it not, that write the headlines?
Exactly, and at the end of the day, it was bad writing and bad editing.
But also,
nothing was well put together.
And it was inaccurate. She said that Shonda Rhimes was the creator of the show that was actually created by a white man.
Right.
Right. Right. And let's not forget, you know, her first big breakout hit was Grey's Anatomy.
Right.
You know,
which had a multiracial cast.
Multiracial cast.
Sure.
Didn't have that quote-unquote angry black female as a lead character.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, we got to stop this conversation right here. Eric, you did very well. You didn't step on any lines. Eric, Pamela, Newkirk, Nyasha Laing. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you're watching Arise America.